Hey guys, welcome to my channel. On this video, I want to discuss The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, as it's now officially 25 years old this month. The game came out in Europe in December, I think it was December 11th, 1998. And my brother bought the game. I was about 13 when it came out, but my older brother bought the game, and we all played it. We were on it this time 25 years ago. We were all playing this game when it first came out, and in them days, we didn't read reviews. I mean, we read magazine reviews, but we didn't really care like we do today. We didn't have the internet those days. We wasn't influenced by social media or anything like that. There was no such thing as the internet for us. So, we bought Zelda because we grew up playing Zelda on the NES and then the Super Nintendo and then the Game Boy. So we knew what Zelda was all about, and we just couldn't wait for this 3D version of it. When Ocarina of Time came out, it was a transitional period. It was that period where we were going from 2D to 3D. We just wanted to play all the 2D games that we grew up with in 3D. And this game was in development for about 5 years, so there was a lot of hype, a lot of expectations, a lot of anticipation. This game was just one of the most anticipated games ever at the time. It was delayed for several years in order to be perfected to the way we know it today. I'm sure it was delayed for about 2 years. That's normal today for games to get delayed, and 5 years development, that's normal. But in them days it wasn't, so yeah, it was a big deal. It was a lot of hype, and eventually when it did come out in 1998, and honestly, there's people today who didn't grow up in that era, weren't even born when this game came out. They'll never know the impact it had at the time, the impact this game had. We will never experience that ever again in video games, ever. This game and games like Mario 64, for this genre, action adventure RPG, open world, you will never experience that ever again. It's like going to the cinemas for the first time and watching Jurassic Park and seeing CGI dinosaurs for the first time on the screen. You'll never get that experience again. The 3D was new then, and very few games pulled it off the way Zelda did. There were 3D games around, of course there were other games like Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie and so on, and even on the PS1 you had Tomb Raider and things like that. But Zelda introduced mechanics that are now standard in video games. This game, as the creator of Dark Souls once said, is like the template for action video games. I think they study this game in Japan, or they used to at least. In like game programmers. I'm sure that's what I read, that they used to study this in school or in universities for game developers, because this game is a template for action adventure games. But yeah, I wanted to discuss it because for me this is actually arguably my favourite game of all time. It's a tough one because I always used to debate it's either this one or A Link to the Past as my favourite Zelda game. I can never decide which one it is. Sometimes I think it's A Link to the Past, sometimes it's Ocarina. But yeah, going back to when this game first came out, it just blew everybody away. Like, no one expected it to be this good. And I was one of the lucky ones back in them days to have owned a PS1 and an N64, because my brother, I've got a few brothers, and they usually buy all the games. So when I was younger, I was lucky that my brothers used to buy games and consoles, and we were lucky to have the PS1 and the N64, and because of that I got to experience so many groundbreaking games on the PS1 and then, groundbreaking games on the N64. Well, I must say, in that era, there was no 3D action-adventure game. Nothing like Ocarina of Time for at least, I'm going to say 10 years, maybe 15 years, I don't know. Definitely a decade. Because even on the PS2, there was nothing on this level like Ocarina of Time. There were games, nothing like it on PS1. PS2 was trying with games like Dark Cloud and a few others. But yeah, I honestly didn't know how big it was. As in how much of a big hit this game was, because in them days we couldn't go on the internet and see what others are saying. I just played it and I loved it. Yeah, it was a great experience, and you know, the game introduced mechanics that are like completely normal today, that's standard in almost every video game. So for example, let's talk about some of the mechanics they introduced. The most obvious one would be the lock-on system. Now, I don't know if modern young gamers of today will know this, but Ocarina of Time was the game that introduced the 3D lock-on system. Now, if you want to know whether that's true or not, you just need to go back to 1998 and you know, see if you can find another game where you have a lock-on system in a 3D game. Any 3D game, whether it's a shooting game or a adventure game like Zelda, you won't find it. And even if you did find it, it probably wasn't. Well, you won't find it for starters, and not before Zelda. But there were definitely other games that came out after it that had 3D lock-on systems, and they just didn't work as good. But you know, it's one of them. But Zelda was the first game to introduce the lock-on system, and if you was to play Ocarina of Time today, if anyone hasn't played it, if you was to play it today, if you did this tutorial section today, you would think that this game is hand-holding you like you're a child who has never played a video game before. But the reason the tutorial is so, you know, simple and it's like it's literally hand-holding you all the way through, like to the point it's telling you need to press the Z button to lock onto this rock, and then switch, you know, from this rock to the other rock. You know, it's training you to lock on to a target. You won't get that in video games today, because every game this is a standard now. Every game now has a 3D lock-on system. But in Ocarina of Time, because it's the first game to introduce this mechanic, it had to train the gamers or the players how the system works. So there's a moment in the game where there's these two rocks and you gotta lock onto them. It's telling you that, you know, lock onto it, press that again, and then lock onto the left and the right rock, and you know it. And then you'll also find that there's another moment in the same little village in Kokiri Forest. There's an NPC who's sitting on top of a shop, and she tells you to lock onto her using the fairy. The fairy is Link's little guide, Navi. So what Nintendo always do in a lot of their games is they integrate the story with the gameplay. They do this in almost every single one of their games. This is probably why a lot of Zelda Nintendo games, they don't really have great stories, but the story is so important with the gameplay. It integrates with the gameplay. And that's why we don't care about the story. You know, Nintendo games are never like narrative, heavier narrative and story. However, because the gameplay is so good and it goes well with the story, you don't care. And so here you've got Navi, who's basically the lock-on target. So Navi is the one who locks onto the enemies when you target them. Navi is the one who, you know, hovers over an NPC when you want to talk to him from a distance. This is how Nintendo introduced new mechanics through story. Another example of this is in Mario 64. It was the first game where it is pretty much the first proper 3D adventure game, yeah? And it's also the first game that allows you to control the camera. Like today, controlling the camera angle is normal in every game. Mario 64 introduced that. But the way they did it, they used the Lakuta thing, you know, the flying cloud geezers, you know. He holds the camera and then you actually control him when you're controlling the camera. That's who you're controlling. It's part of the story. It's a very simple story, but it works with the gameplay. So that's what Nintendo do often with their games. They integrate the story with the, you know, gameplay. So that's what they did here with the lock-on system. And yeah, this lock-on system is so revolutionary. It's used in so many different ways. It's used to communicate with NPCs. It's used to lock onto enemy targets, obviously, whether you're fighting them with your sword or whether you're shooting them from a long distance, you know, with your slingshot or bow and arrow. You know, so you can obviously aim first person with a slingshot, or you can choose to lock onto it. All of this is standard in video games today. This is the game that introduced it and perfected it at the time. And many games for decades tried to get this right. Eventually they did, and today, you know, it is standard in every action game. But the Ocarina of Time didn't just introduce the lock-on system. It introduced other features that we take for granted today. That's just normal in every video game that we play today. But when you play Ocarina of Time today, when you do this tutorial section, you'll notice things like little simple things like this. So in this game, you can't control the camera. That's one of the first things I noticed when I first played Ocarina of Time. After playing Mario 64, I expected every 3D game to allow you to control the camera. But I realised that, hold on a second, in Zelda you can't control the camera. You've got the C buttons. The C buttons were used to control the camera in Mario. But in Zelda you can't control the camera, so I was thinking, how does that work? And then I realised as I played it that you don't need to control the camera in this game. The way it works is you press the Z button and it aligns with the direction you're looking. So this is standard today in almost every game. Like in modern PlayStation games, you'll probably press the you know, the left stick or the right stick to straighten the camera angle to see the direction your character is looking. So if you want your character to look straight, you press, I don't know, L3 or R3, the thumbstick, right? Ocarina of Time introduced this as well. I mean, there's literally a tutorial section just for this in Ocarina of Time. You read the signs and it tells you, use this system, you know, press the Z button to see straight. I mean, back in the days when I played this game, I thought nothing of it. I just thought, okay, it's tutorial, you know, it's teaching me how to, you know, learn the buttons and learn the system. When I look back at this game now, I just think, oh my days, this game is unbelievable. Like it is, I don't know, it's like, it is a template for video games, for action video games. It literally introduced so many features that are standard in video games today. And that's just one feature. There's another one that I'm going to highlight. The action button. So you'll notice on the top of the menu, top of the screen, you've got the green button and the blue button. The green button is Link's attack, so you know, your sword. The green button, the blue button, it keeps changing. You'll notice it says attack, or if you stand next to something, you might say read, or you know, open a door, it'll say open. So this is the action button. Before Ocarina of Time, in order for you to pick an item up in a video game, you'd probably have a separate button for that. In order to, you know, jump, you'll have a separate button for that. In order to attack or read, you'll have different buttons. Now Zelda made it, in a 3D game at least, I'm talking 3D games, it made sure that one button can be used for multiple different things. Right, you want to pick, you want to swim, you want to run, you want to roll, you want to do a certain move. It's all done with one button. You want to grab a rock, pull it, push it, press the same action button. And there's a term for this. I can't remember what the term is in the video game technical world. I can't remember what it was, but I'm just going to call it the action button. And this has become standard in video games today. But it was first done here in Ocarina of Time. Yeah, like it's crazy how one button is used to do so many different things, and that's just normal today. It's hard to believe, but this game introduced that. And again, that's why in the tutorial section at the beginning of part of the game, you'll get NPCs telling you, or signs telling you, press this button to open the door, press this button to grab this boulder and pull it or push it, today you wouldn't even get that. That's just something you wouldn't even get in a video game. You know, they wouldn't. Like for example, in a game like Uncharted, you probably wouldn't even get that because gamers know all that now. This is normal. We've played so many games. This is normal. We expect this. But just play this game and just it's crazy how when you play it now, it all seems very basic and it feels like, why are they telling me all this for? Like I already know all this. Like this is normal in video games. But that's how important this video game is. I mean, I'm not even going into how amazing this game is. I'm just talking about how revolutionary it was. And there's other things that just blew me away back in the days that I still remember the very first time I played it. There's a moment in the first dungeon where you've got a Deku stick. And initially I didn't know how to use these Deku sticks. I just thought they were like some kind of a cheap weapon. If you're, I don't know, for some reason you might not want to use a sword and use a stick. I didn't know how to use it, the stick. And I got stuck inside in one of the rooms and I didn't know what to do. And then I remember one of my mates telling me, oh, you need to get the stick, set it on fire, and then light up this other, like, you know, like a lamp or something. And I was thinking, oh shit, how did I not see that? Whoa, how did I not know that? I'm like, what? That's clever. I just remember feeling like that's so clever. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It kind of blew me away. I just thought, oh, that's so clever. Like wood, fire, and then you light up something, and then it also reminded me. Hold on. I'm getting a flashback. These puzzles, I've seen them somewhere before. Yeah, A Link to the Past, the 2D Zelda games on the Super Nintendo and the NES. Yeah, basically, this game, even though it's so revolutionary, introduced so many new mechanics that, like, just, you know, every game does today. It was literally, from Nintendo's perspective, just a 3D version of A Link to the Past. A lot of the same puzzles from A Link to the Past are returned in Ocarina of Time, but from a 3D perspective. And it was at that point I was just like, you know what, I've seen these puzzles before, they're in A Link to the Past, they're the same puzzles, but just now in 3D, and a little bit more realistic. You get wood and you put it on fire, and then, you know, you simple puzzles like that, and then pushing a block, and, you know, the typical old Zelda puzzles, they were all back in Ocarina of Time. Again, another simple puzzle that you'll get in video games today, and everyone will just do it like it's nothing. It's, you know, but it was first done here, and you know, this video is about the 25th anniversary of Zelda. So that's why I'm talking about it. Like in 25 years, we've seen video games evolve so much, but 3D games, you know, they owe a lot to this game. This game revolutionized 3D action adventure games. And yeah, it's just one of the best games of all time. I mean, for me personally, it probably is the best game ever. It probably is still my favourite Zelda game, you know. I mean, I've not even talked about like the visuals or the story. The visuals, you can see them here, you know. Sure, they probably haven't aged well. If you're one of those people who don't like N64 visuals, and you know, you might complain a bit. Me personally, I think the visuals are fine in this game. Like, sure, it could do with a remake, of course, but is this version still playable? For me personally, it is. There are some N64 games and PS1 games I really can't play anymore. This one, I mean, you can just see the gameplay here. This is me playing it now, like on the Switch Online with an N64 controller. And it plays fine. I couldn't get off it. I was hooked. I was thoroughly enjoying it. Visuals haven't put me off at all. I think the visuals are still, for a game that's 25 years old, I think it's held on pretty well. At the time though, honestly, these visuals were so good, it's hard to explain. Like, these were some of the best 3D graphics. In fact, they were the best 3D graphics. The only competition it had was the PS1. The PS1 didn't really do polygons that well because it was a 32-bit system. The PS1 relied on pre-rendered backdrops, CGI, to make the games look good, like Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and those sort of games, Parasite Eve, Tekken. But when it came to 3D, full 3D games, no, you N64 did it better. And not all of them, but Zelda, this one, Ocarina of Time, was the best. For my opinion, this was the best 3D game, like in terms of visuals. For its day, it definitely was. I think it was better than Majora's Mask visually. So yeah, it's. I still think it's aged alright. I can still play it. It doesn't bother me too much. Nostalgia, I guess you could argue, and that's probably the reason. But there are some 3D games I just struggle with, like Jet Force Gemini, for example. But I think Zelda's always, held on, and it looks great. Soundtrack is without doubt one of the best soundtracks in video game history, in my opinion. It's Koji Kondo. It was the last time the legendary composer Koji Kondo composed the entire Zelda soundtrack. He did all the Zelda games before Ocarina of Time, and he also did the Mario games. He's an absolute legend. He's like John Williams of video games. So many of his like tunes are just very catchy and memorable. So the music in this game is extremely memorable and iconic. There's nothing to complain about. I think there's not even a single tune that's not great in this game. Story, for me, I'd say Ocarina of Time, of all the Zelda games, has the best story. It's, there's certain parts of the story, like, like backstory, I mean, when it comes to the story side of things, for me, it's the whole time traveling side of it all. I love it. I love the, playing Link as a child and then playing him as an adult, traveling 7 years into the future and then, doing puzzles. Like, for example, the very last dungeon, obviously I'm not gonna show any clips of it here, but the Spirit Temple, which is one of the final temples in the game, you have to do that as a child, and then you have to, come back into the future. So you have to like do some stuff in the past so that it affects the future, if you know what I mean. It's a really good like story that involves time traveling, and it also is the Zelda game that splits the timeline and ends up creating 3 Zelda timelines. So yeah, it's out of all the Zelda games, I'd say story-wise this is the best one. It's still a very simple story compared to modern games today. Like, I wouldn't compare it to anything like Final Fantasy or Persona. It's nothing like that. It's Nintendo. They keep their story very simple. But for its day, it was very good. It had us all in love with the characters and what was going on. The time traveling side of things was great. So this game is definitely one of the best games that I've ever played. Does it hold up today? I personally think it does. I think it definitely does. I think if you have a Nintendo Switch online, if you have an N64 controller, if you don't have an N64 controller, I think you can still play it. You can always buy Brawler 64, which is a third-party retro controller with like very similar to a modern controller. I would probably say get one of those. But yeah, you can still play it. I think you can still play it quite well with a modern Pro controller. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it if you've never played Ocarina of Time. What I would say to anyone who's played like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, don't compare it to those games. Just go in there with a mindset that this game came out in 1998 and there was no other 3D game like it. I mean, the only games you could compare it with is Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64, and there were a few other 3D games that just, Banjo and Mario were the peak, if you ask me. You had Metal Gear Solid at the time, but it's not really that, it's got 3D visuals, but the gameplay, it's not like open world, is it? But yeah, I would say if you wanted to play it today, play it like it's 1998. Don't compare it with, modern games of today. Just go in there like it's 1998, play it again, and yeah, just enjoy it. It's still a very, very good game. It's sure the gameplay is not going to be as smooth as modern games like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, but if you can get past all that, just get used to the old school combat, yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. It's a very good game. It's definitely a game that you should play. I mean, on Metacritic it's the highest rated game of all time. It's got 99%. You know, you owe it to yourself to play this game. This is considered the greatest video game of all time by critics and gamers. And today, yeah, many people will argue that, say, no, this is better, that's better. But not many games have revolutionized the industry like this one. And there is no, like, it is totally subjective what is the best game ever, so there's no right or wrong answer. But yeah, I would say if you've never played it, you should give it a try. It's on the Switch Online, and I totally recommend it. And it's been 25 years, and I'm gonna probably go through it all over again. I've just started playing it and really enjoying it. So yeah, let me know in the comment section, guys, if you've played Ocarina of Time before, if it's a game you want to play, and yeah, just let me know in the comment section what you think. And thanks for watching, guys. I'm gonna leave it there, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.